The aftermath of the kidnapping, being received the way that we were by law enforcement, by the media, by the public, all of that was even more devastating than the actual crime itself.
My girlfriend, we got kidnapped last night.
And you didn't call last night when this occurred?
I was tied up.
Oh my God, it's her.
I just got a message. She's walking over to my house.
Anything I did or said was under a microscope, picked apart. If I was too emotional, then I'm faking it. If I'm not emotional, it didn't really happen. They went from one conclusion to another that was wrong. Our primary goal is to make sure this man does not hurt another family.
Netflix recently released a 3-part docuseries called American Nightmare about Denise and Aaron's horrific ordeal. Now, this is by the same producers of The Tinder Swindler, and you guys might remember we actually spoke to those women a little while ago too. I immediately reached out to both Denise and Aaron, firstly because I had this overwhelming feeling that I just needed to say sorry for what they went through and for not being believed, which is a strange feeling to want to do to two people that you don't know and you've just watched on television. And secondly, because I was so shocked on so many levels that I just wanted to help to continue to tell their story. It was not only the details of the crime that had me hooked, but the way this docuseries went beyond the surface of a crime to explore the nuances of victimhood and highlight the law enforcement failures, which it did very well. So Denise, welcome to Life Uncut. I'm so excited to have you today.
Thank you for having me.
Denise, we start every episode of this podcast by asking you what your most embarrassing story is. We call it an accidentally unfiltered. Do you have an embarrassing story?
It also feels strange to ask you that with the premise of this episode, but also everyone has an embarrassing story.
Right. Well, my initial reaction was is being publicly called Gone Girl not enough, right?
When you sent that email, I was like, she has a really good sense of humor.
Well, yeah, and humor is a really important thing when you're overcoming trauma and tragedy, and it's something I think initially you don't expect. But I mean, when you're going through the worst moments of your life, it all gets so heavy that you need levity, you need like a moment of reprieve, and just even making a stupid, silly joke can be enough just to like lighten the mood. So
how does it feel now? Because I'm sure it's one thing to have had the world know your story when it happened and for it to be written about, but I'm sure it's another feeling for it to be really out there again, you personally telling your story on such a humongous platform. How are you feeling now that the world has seen that?
Oh, there's a lot of mixed emotions. And it hit me, the both of us, harder than I think we realized. You know, in preparation, the team at Netflix is like, how are you doing? It can be quite overwhelming when it hits 190 countries in a day and millions of views. And, you're going into it trying to prepare mentally, but there's no way to prepare. And it's tough because there was such a positive reception from so many people all over the world. I can't even count how many messages we've gotten. And so it should be really positive. But I think there's also, the public exposure right after the kidnapping was so intertwined with those 2 days of captivity of, am I going to get out of this alive? So internally, my body just processes it as a life or death situation. And so, the past month and a half since it's been out, there's just a lot of that like deep pain and processing and feeling of sickness and anxiety. It's been a challenge to process through it, but at the same time, it's the reception of it that it got number one. The messages, the overall meanings that we were hoping that people would walk away with are definitely hitting very hard. And so it's very, it's reassuring and really leaves me hopeful because it's clear that the audience is really receptive of, how victims are treated, victim blaming. A lot of people can connect to big parts of what we went through. And so yeah, it's a mixed bag.
Well, that was one thing I did want to ask you is what were your key hopes to get out of filming this documentary?
Well, everyone focused initially, and still kind of does, about the sensational aspects of the kidnapping and, the elaborate pieces of it, all the reasons why they said they didn't believe it, who the kidnappers writing emails in defense of us and all the lengths that they went through during the home invasion. And for us, though, the aftermath of the kidnapping being received the way that we were by law enforcement, by the media, by the public, the rush to judgment, the victim blaming, the shame, all of that was even more devastating than the actual crime itself, because you can kind of understand that there's people out there who are motivated to terrorize and cause harm, but there's still that hope that there are people to turn to that are there to help. And we turned to those people and they just made everything worse and they attacked us. And that was really difficult to comprehend. And then they essentially, by saying the hoax claims, destroyed our reputations. Anything of value in our life that we wanted to return to after overcoming a life or death situation was taken from us. So the things that gave us meaning, we were lost. And even as time has gone since then, hearing from other survivors and them saying that they were treated that way when they went to police, and the false accusations and confirmation bias, the realization of how common that is really devastating, and reason why we feel like it's really important to keep sharing.
Denise, when the docu-series first came out on Netflix, we actually spoke about it in the podcast. It was a recommendation that we do every week. And the conversation we had was how I think in the last couple of years, we've predominantly seen this switch in policing of police. And I think that that's because there are now media companies that are willing to hold them accountable. And that's something that we didn't have access to before we had social media and before there were companies like Netflix investigating this type of thing. You guys released a book in 2021. And for that, you kind of had to relive a lot of this, trauma, like very severe trauma. Are you able to now get to a point where you can talk about your story, more people know the reality of the story? Does it kind of counter this narrative that the media actually portrayed, or do you still feel as though you have to kind of prove yourself and prove that you were telling the truth the entire time?
It's gotten better. There's more people who believe in us, are interested in the truth. And the reason why law enforcement can go out and publicly make a statement, people believe in the police and they do it quickly to implant that narrative. And then it's really hard for people to forget about that and let that go. And so there's definitely still people within the Vallejo Police Department who are involved in the investigation of our kidnapping who don't believe us still, and still think that we're somehow involved, which is insane considering the evidence that they have. There's still people in the public who don't believe in it, don't want to believe in it. And there is also a lot of pressure in speaking publicly. Again, initially anything I did or said was under a microscope, picked apart. If I was too emotional, then I'm faking it. If I'm, not emotional, then it didn't really happen. There was a no-win situation. And so speaking to law enforcement, giving them every detail, there's too many details, there's not enough details, so that I think is still very much something that I battle with, and the pressure of performing the way that people expect. And then even, writing a book and doing a docuseries, there's also, a big publishing company or co-author, there's the network, the producers, the whole team's involved, putting money into it to make this happen. And so there's still that pressure of like not wanting to let them down. Or if I don't sit there and perform in the way that they think will be entertaining for the audience or emotional enough or whatever, then, I'm letting everyone else down. And there's, certainly a lot of that.
You did say something a little bit earlier that I just wanted to go back to because I feel like it's extremely important and we brushed over it a bit. But you said that the aftermath and people's responses, including the police, but the general public as well, was far worse than a kidnapping and 2 days of sexual assault and thinking that you're going to die. And I want people to think about that for a second, because you're saying people harassing you online and on the news and not believing you was worse, which I completely believe you. But I think that is crazy that people don't realize the harm in their words online. People think that they can write one thing and that's it, right? Like they're an anonymous troll online, doesn't matter. But to you, you're getting that from millions of people and it's made it worse than your entire experience. I do want to go back a little bit, if we can, just to your relationship with Aaron, how you guys met, how long were you together before this happened?
Yeah, we met. I was in Vallejo for a physical therapy residency at the hospital Kaiser. There's an amazing program to specialize in working with patients with neurological disorders. And he worked there and, we interacted socially and professionally, like in group settings. And we just always kept gravitating towards one another. There was just an instant connection. He had just been was still going through this breakup with his ex-fiance who also worked with us. So it was initially one of those, do I even go there? It wasn't the ideal situation, but in the end, our connection, we couldn't deny it. So we were dating for about 7 months before the kidnapping. And it was a really complicated situation, but we instantly fell in love. And there'd be moments where we're like, okay, maybe we need to take a break so he could process through this a little bit. And we would like take a break for a day or two and then, reconnect.
Love is love. When it's there, you can't deny it.
Well, Laura, who usually hosts this podcast, is the biggest believer that you can heal within relationships. It's not this binary process where
you have to be whole before you enter.
Totally, where you have to enter at this completeness.
For those people that haven't seen the documentary yet, I know that they 100% will, but can you take us back to the night that it happened and what you remember? When did you realize that there was somebody in the house? Did you hear something from downstairs or another room, or was it until you were literally someone standing over your bed? What did that look like?
Well, no, Aaron and we had an emotional evening before we went to bed. We were at a crossroads in our relationship and trying to figure out, do we move forward? Can we make this work? And ultimately we decided, yes, we can. And so we were emotionally exhausted, went to bed around midnight, and it was about 3 a.m. when I was woken from a deep sleep to where I was convinced that I was still dreaming, that it was a nightmare, but I kept hearing a voice relentlessly saying, wake up, this is a robbery, we're not here to hurt you. And I think as soon as I realized that it was reality and not actually a dream, my eyes shot open, my body froze. I could see a flashing white light against the wall and red laser dots crossing the wall and over our bodies. And the voice just kept speaking, and I realized we're surrounded. They have guns. Like, people are here. This is real. And, there wasn't really a chance to react. It was really like paralyzed in sleep and then instantly realizing what was happening. And the voice just kept speaking and gave instructions and told me to tie up Aaron, and he dropped zip ties at the edge of the bed and he talked me through tying up Aaron's hands behind his back and his feet together. And I didn't think about screaming because I felt like if I did, that they had guns, they would shoot us. Instantly, it was designed to make us defenseless. And then it just got worse and worse from there.
These people and the voices, were they in the room, or was a voice coming from outside and giving you instructions?
No, it was in the room. He had a large master bedroom, but it was still pretty vacant. You know, he had a big bed and 2 like bedside tables and 1 armchair in the corner, but it was a pretty big open space. So 2 of them were on the corner of the bed closest to Aaron.
I remember when I was watching your story on Netflix, and the one question that I had the entire way was, there are multiple people involved here.
Yeah, so where the hell are they?
Where the fuck are they?
Well, yeah.
You know, Britt and I spoke about whether, like you said, it was very elaborate, it was very planned. Was there a way to fake the amount of people in the room or have voice recordings or something like that? And I keep coming back to this idea that I was like, no, they weren't drugged at this point. You know, you would be highly aware if there was more than one person in the room. And yet still to this day, there have not been multiple people pursued.
Not that they haven't even been looked for. And that's something that's like part of the gaslighting even after Mueller's caught and beyond of, well, you know, they found a blow up doll in his car and thought, okay, that's what they saw. And there was pre-recorded messages that were played for us. Blacked out swim goggles were put over our eyes and then headphones, and it was connected to something with these pre-recorded messages with like a dubbed over voice giving instruction, again, kind of in like a robotic way, saying like, be calm, we aren't here to hurt you, we're here for financial gain. And then saying that a medic would come and take our blood pressure, that we would be given sedatives. So later, the FBI found those recordings and claimed that that was part of what he did to fool us to believe that there was other people. But just because we listened to the recordings doesn't mean that that's why we thought that there was more people. I saw 2 people standing at the edge of the bed. My head was down, but the 2 people standing wasn't a blow up doll. They were moving. We heard when we were upstairs in the bedroom closet, we could hear people downstairs at opposite ends of the house. It was like a 2,400 square foot house. So it was a large home. And so they were on opposite ends of the downstairs. One was going through the drawers. Another one was using a drill that we were assuming that they were putting up the camera to monitor Aaron. The one person who spoke, which we know is now Matthew Mueller, he was upstairs in the bathroom next to us. And there's like someone walked past as he was guiding me to the next room. Like, you can't deny movement of somebody else. There's no way to replicate that. There was also tasers that would be snapped from the opposite side of the room as a threat, which we took that okay. And then even in one of the recordings, they said, if you don't comply, we will cut your partner's face or give electric shock. So yeah, I mean, I could go on and on about other things that when I was in captivity, he said the others were coming to the house. A different truck pulled up to the house. I was taken in what we now know is a Mustang, but I assumed it was a Mustang with how it sounded. So it was a very different car. You know, I could hear the doors open and close. I heard whispering in the next room. So the blow up doll and the recordings don't answer all of those things. And the frustrating thing is they went from one conclusion to another that was wrong. You know, Aaron murdered me, then I show up alive and it's a hoax. And then they catch this one guy and he did it by himself. And it was all very, like, it was really early on when I spoke to one of the FBI agents and he said, I'm 98% sure he did it by himself. And they hadn't even gone through all of his electronic devices. So I was like, dude, can you, and I even said this to him, I'm like, I really, please approach this objectively and with an open mind, because we know that there was more people involved. And it just, everything we've seen since then doesn't seem like they've actually taken that seriously.
Well, when they're like, he's like, oh, I'm 98% sure he's alone. You're like, great, mate. I'm 100% sure he wasn't. So seen as though I was the one there.
Well, that was the other thing, because the one agent with the conflict of interest, David Sesma, he questioned me the second day when I went in for questioning by law enforcement, and I was with my attorney. And at the end of it, he had told me are you sure that there are anything that you don't want to change? It's a felony to lie to a federal agent. And then he told my lawyer off in the next room, I'm 99% sure she's lying. Have you seen the movie Gone Girl? And so when later they're telling me I'm 98% sure he did it by himself, I'm like, okay, cool, bro. Like last time you were 99% sure and you were 100% wrong. So can we forget about this percentage? I held my tongue, but trying not to cuss to an agent, but it's like, please, enough with this percentage stuff. Like, keep an open mind.
It's such patronizing language. I mean, we all have this inbuilt evolutionary sense. It's an instinctual sense that when we are in a position where we could literally die, your senses are heightened, your sympathetic nervous system goes into overdrive. It's like that thing when you're somewhere alone at night in the dark and you can feel when there is someone around you.
Yes.
I think you had a very instinctual response to what happened to you. You seem to be quite pragmatic and very like, this is what I need to do to survive. When you were initially taken, Denise, you were taken into a car and you were driven away. What do you remember from that time?
Well, when he put me in the trunk of the car and the door closed, the air was thinner and instantly I was afraid that I would suffocate. And I was thinking, I mean, these people fucking stupid, I'm going to die in here, but then, I knew I was starting to panic. I kept thinking, if something goes wrong, they could just stop at the side of the road and burn the car, and thinking of like what that would be like to be burned alive. And, your mind just races with all the possibilities of the horror that you could face. And so, I just I'm a physical therapist and I've talked and trained people with breathing techniques. And so I'm just sitting there trying to just focus on my breath, try to not let myself go to those places, because of course, like instantly just even waking up to a voice speaking, like you were saying, everything in your body says like react, do something. But then the logical side of you is going, well, no, if you do that, you could be hurt, you could be killed. And it's not just me, but my actions could hurt or kill the person that I love. I felt too, like the whole 48 hours, if I let myself go too far, like I was just on the edge of losing my mind, like not being able to hold it together. And I knew that I might not be able to physically fight or scream right now, but I need to pay attention, control my reaction, and get as much information as possible because there might be something here that gets me out of this alive.
It's right what you said, that it's not just you. And it's so easy now to think of you in that car on the way to your captivity. But then when we think back to where Aaron is, he's doing the same thing. He thinks that he can't move and he all he wants to do is help you back at home, but he can't move because if he does, you could die.
Well, initially, we were given sedatives that I think for some reason, it seems for like a lot of people, especially in the media and reporting, don't get how powerful sedatives can be and what it actually does. I mean, he was completely knocked out. He was passed out unconscious for hours. And I was too, when I was in the trunk of the car. Like I was trying to like stay calm and pay attention to like, which way am I turning? Or what does this sound like? But eventually, I couldn't fight the weight of the sedatives. And that was the same for him. And so eventually when it started wearing off, I think maybe it was around like 11 a.m. or noon. And that's when he realized like, okay, I'm going to have to start doing something. They're going to ask me to do things. They were telling him they were going to communicate through his phone and messages and text messages. And they had a camera pointing at him. And so he thought that they were monitoring him. And so, he was really just trying to like be present because he knew he needed to save me. But then he started realizing the camera wasn't working. It was making this noise. And so he thought like, okay, maybe and he was responding to some of the messages and he wasn't getting an immediate response back. And he thought, well, if they see me, can't they see that I'm responding? So that's when he started kind of going, okay, maybe they don't have full view of me. maybe there's a chance that I could reach out. And he thought, because he was told they had tracking, they were monitoring his phone. So he thought, okay, I can't call 911, but if I call my brother, who's an FBI agent, then I could just tell them, some story that, we were supposed to meet. And so I was trying to cancel or whatever. But he eventually got in contact with his brother, and his brother said, you need to call 911 immediately. And that's when he realized, like, okay, I do. But that decision for him was the hardest. Like, to make that, I don't know. I don't think I'd want to trade places. Like, yes, I was in captivity and I was raped and I thought I was going to die. But like, to be in a position where a decision you're making could lead to someone else being killed, the woman you love, is, like, he knew he would be safe if he called the police, but he thought he could be killing me. But he believed in law enforcement and believed that they would help. And so he called, and sadly it made everything worse.
Denise, I can imagine that a question that the two of you have wondered for a long time is, why us? Why me? Why did this have to happen to us? Have you ever got clarity on why you were targeted?
No, I'm not sure if I'll ever know. There was the reasoning that was given by the kidnappers, Moeller, who was the one speaking to us, who held me captive, who raped me. He explained to Aaron separately and me separately. And then also it was in the pre-recorded messages that this was a mission intended to target his ex. And he said her first and last name, and her name was in the pre-recorded messages that were played for Aaron, saying, like, I'm going to take Andrea, and you're going to, and gave the instruction. And he told me when I was in captivity, this was meant for her. I got the wrong intel. You saw a mail with her name on it and an engagement card of theirs, but this was months ago. And it was my fault. And even after I was released, and then the police went on national news to say that it was a hoax, the next day, police and media were getting emails from the kidnappers saying, it's not a hoax, we did it, trying to get credit for what they had done, and said, again, in the emails, this was a mistake. It wasn't intended for Denise, it was intended for Andrea, and continued with that. And so that's another thing of, like, that's been frustrating. I don't know if that aspect has been fully evaluated. And what made it worse is we found out later that the lead agent in charge of investigating the kidnapping, the one who told my attorney that he thought I was Gone Girl, had a prior relationship with Aaron's ex, and it overlapped when Aaron and her started dating. So he definitely knew who Aaron was, and he didn't question Aaron, he questioned me. And so it feels like the significance of her being the main target was diminished to potentially diminish the significance of his conflict of interest.
What do you and Aaron make of that situation? Because of course that could be just one of the most wild coincidences, but to a viewer, I know how I felt. I felt like there's no way all these dots could have aligned. Like, it just felt like there was a connection that was being missed. What do you guys think?
I mean, there's so much of everything we've gone through that is so hard to believe that, it very much could be that law enforcement with their egos had their confirmation biased, and the lead agent just thought, okay, this is going to be a big case and I'm going to be on it, despite me knowing, Andrea and Aaron, and I'm just going to stay on it because this could help boost my career. And so, it really could just be a series of coincidences.
I'd love to know a little bit about, and I don't quite know how to ask this question because it's so contradictory, but those few days that you were in captivity, It almost looked like, in a way, he was being polite. And I don't know how to say it because you can't be polite when you've just kidnapped and are about to rape somebody. But what I mean by that, for the people that haven't seen it, and I hope you can expand on this, Denise, is it just seems like he was like, I'm really sorry that I'm about to rape you, like, and I'm sorry that this has to happen. And that doesn't make sense to me because I'm like, well, if you're sorry, you're not going to do it. What was his demeanor like to you over those few days?
Yeah, from the beginning, he was the pseudo remorse, the politeness. I mean, instantly from the instructions of having me tie up Aaron, as I'm trying to tighten the zip ties, my hands are shaking. I'm overwhelmed. I'm afraid that I'm not going to be doing it properly or fast enough. And it's almost as if he was reading my mind, because he would say, "You're doing a good job. You are staying calm." Yeah, so throughout from the beginning, even when he said that this wasn't intended for you and I'm sorry, we got to the location he held me captive in, and as he walked me inside, he says, I don't want to dehumanize you any more than I have to, so I will let you use the restroom by yourself, knock on the door when you're done. Pretty quickly, I realized it was just a form of manipulation, and he was trying to condition me. If he could show me that he's not going to be aggressively violent, then maybe I won't be either. And it became almost like this game of, like, I equate it to like this just horrible game of chess where I don't know the rules. He's in charge of the rules. They constantly change. And if I lose, I'm dead. But I still have to play. I still have to figure this out. And it's like he's doing all of this. Clearly, you don't choose to do a kidnapping and follow through with rapes if you don't have some pleasure out of it and some motivation to cause harm and to terrorize someone. So I think some of it wasn't just to manipulate me, but also to manipulate himself, to convince himself I'm not all that bad. So I have to do this. And it's he had to continuously drug me. It's protocol. I have to do this. But yeah, it's all bullshit, because if you really do feel bad, just stop. Just be done with it. Release me. So yeah, and even with the emails that were sent later on, it was like, we can't see, like, yes, we caused them harm, but we can't see two innocent victims be shown this way publicly, like we did it. Here's evidence to show that we did it. So I think everyone's tries to be the hero of their own story. And so it's like he created this huge mess and terrorized people, but then he's like, oh, I'm gonna be the hero and make it better.
Even the rape was a form of manipulation in itself, and control, I guess, by saying that he had filmed it, and that would go out to whomever to see if you did anything wrong. It's like micro manipulation within a larger world of manipulation.
Right. And after the first rape, when I hadn't fought back, he took me to the bathroom and he said, well, now you can take off the goggles when you're in a room alone. Here's some toiletries, take a shower, and I pulled up the blindfold and I saw just like this array of like, shampoo and conditioner and a toothbrush and just all this stuff. And I'm like, he's rewarding me for my good behavior. I was a good girl. But then at the same time, there's always that threat. Like, if you don't, like, you don't want to know what's going to happen.
Did that type of mentality continue throughout the entire time that you interacted with him? And I mean more so in the court case when he was being prosecuted. Did that narrative shift, or do you think he still was trying to convince himself that this was something he had to do?
No, well, when he was caught and in custody, and the detective, Alameda Sheriff's Department, for the Dublin case where he attacked another family and he left his personal cell phone, and they were able to find him. And there's one detective who, when they arrested him, was like, there's something wrong here. There's more to this. I think there's another victim. She found goggles with the blonde hair. Her victims didn't have blonde hair. And so she's like, I need to find out who this other victim is. Once they were able to link and connect the cases, there was overwhelming amounts of evidence that showed that he kidnapped me, held me captive. Later, they found the recordings of the rapes. So there was absolutely no way he could get out of it. He was absolutely guilty for doing it. So his only defense to say he was not guilty was to say that he was mentally unwell. And he claimed that he has bipolar disorder, and then he was in a manic state and delusional, et cetera, et cetera. And I mean, to us, it's like, well, of course you're going to say that you're, mentally unwell or insane. And you can't claim that you're mentally insane if you plotted and planned this kidnapping with a group of people, for half of a year. So I'm not surprised that he went that route, but that's the route that he went on. And so he was very strategic when he did interviews with media later, like, I'm saying I'm not guilty and there's the law. He's a Harvard trained lawyer. So he knows what he's doing. I have no doubt that he's probably struggled mentally. And I felt that when I was in captivity. And that was part of my defense. I thought, okay, I could feel from him that, because he kept wanting to talk to me and tell me that he had PTSD. I was in the military. This is the only way I can earn a living. So I kind of would turn to him and listen, and like, he wanted to talk. So, okay, I'm going to be your therapist, just trying to build a rapport, trying to connect with him as a human, because I thought that might be the only way to get me out alive. And I think, it felt very much too like if I provoked him, I antagonized him, it might fit the narrative that he had, or maybe of a past experience, and would take out whatever that was on me. So I wanted to make sure I didn't push him over the edge, and kind of handled him with care and showed him too that he could trust me to not react, not fight. So then maybe it could show him that he could release me and I would still be compliant.
And what were his actions, and what was the dialogue around the time that he decided to let you go? The time he decided to drive you back to your parents' house. Do you remember, was there a point that you think he switched? Was there something that you said, or something that he said?
He maintained from the beginning, this was intended for Andrea. We were hired by an outside person. We're going to hold you for 48 hours and then we're going to release you. And it was always that, because I would say to him anytime he was there, I'm like, I know you're going to kill me. I know you are. And he would say, no, I'm not. That's not what that's not what we're in this for. We're startup companies to show people. So even if there is media coverage, it's actually good PR for us, because it shows that we can complete these things and not kill and not overreact and kill the victim, that we can follow through. And so he kept saying 48 hours, and he wasn't beating me or really physically being violent. He raped me, but I kept thinking, okay, like, I'm going to wait this out. But I knew if that 48 hours came and went and he made up some excuse, any excuse not to release me, then I knew that I would have to switch gears and figure out how not to take the sedative and somehow find a way to fight back. But sure enough, he woke me up in the middle of the night and said, okay, we're going to go. He had said that he couldn't release me in the Bay Area because police were looking for me. He said that he wanted to release me to where I could get to my family. So I told him where I grew up, and we decided on a crossroads that was, I didn't want him to know exactly where my parents lived, but it was on my driver's license and he had my purse. So it was like, I can't really lie to him, but it was a little less than a mile from my mom's house. And so and even in the car, I wasn't sure if he just kept saying this just to keep me compliant and calm. And there's one moment where he stopped at a rest stop to say I could go to the bathroom. And I realized, oh my God, it's dead quiet. Like, this is where he's going to kill me. And he opened a door and I was alone in a campsite bathroom. And I thought, holy shit, he really is going to release me. Like, I was in shock and disbelief in it all. And yeah, and I even too was like, he's just telling me he's going to release me near my family's house. And when he drove off and I had tape over my eyes, I peeled off the tape and I started walking down the street and I saw that I was in my neighborhood. And that's when it just finally sunk in. He followed through.
Denise, what was the media coverage up until that point, and at what point did it switch to we thought it was Aaron, now this is the real life gone girl?
Well, I didn't see the media at the time, and I didn't even right after the kidnapping. I think I saw Nancy Grace's piece and I was like, I can't watch this shit.
Yeah.
And even my family's like, don't read the comments, don't, so I really didn't pay attention. But, later looking back pretty quickly, almost immediately, it was, why did the boyfriend wait, 11 hours to call? And even then my dad was asked that question and I was still missing and my dad had no idea what was happening to me. And the one person who should be the most irrational and hysterical said, well, maybe he was tied up. Maybe he was drugged. And it's like, if like my dad can come up with that and law enforcement and the media can't, it's kind of maddening. I think then, because I was forced to record a proof of life to verify that I was alive the day that I was alive, because I had to give a current event and a personal fact about me. And the media would say, it was like, wow, she's really calm. Again, not realizing that I'm sedated heavily. My family couldn't recognize me. Aaron was like, she's scared, but everyone else's interpretation is like, whoa, she's too calm. Henry Lee, the reporter who was on the Netflix series, again in the series, goes, it sounds like she's ordering off a menu. Like,
Fuck
you
with.
fucking kidding me? Like, what like, what am I supposed to do? Like, I've been told I'm like, need to record this. I was just given another sedative. I could hardly hold. He had me recite and repeat over and over again. This wasn't a live phone call where I'm calling in and I have the chance to think, Mom, save me. Like I had to do the task. I completed the task and then I'm being punished for it. Same thing of like, she shows up alive. Well, thank God I'm alive, but I guess you guys aren't happy that I'm alive. Sorry that I survived this,
It's not like there's a handbook for being kidnapped in the middle of the night by a stranger and raped for 2 days and then released. And there's no right or wrong way for any victim in any situation to act. And the media and the police should know that. That's what's so infuriating. And I'm so sorry that you had to go through that entire thing. And then you come out and you think, oh my God, I'm safe. Like, these are the people that are going to look after me and help bring this to justice. And then they just fuck you.
Yeah. Well, and it made it even more terrifying because Mueller in captivity, the way that he said, we will be watching you, we will know what you say. And the arrogance, he was not afraid of getting caught at all. And he even told me, Aaron went to police, you'll have to speak to them. These are the things you can and can't say. He, of course, told me, you can't say that you were, he's called it us having sex, but you can't say that you were raped or that I was in the military. But it made me wonder why so quickly I was not only not believed, but attacked. Like immediately, the first interaction I had with the Vallejo detective Mustard was him saying that he was going to offer me a proffer of agreement. I haven't even spoken to him. I spoke to Huntington Beach police, but I'm thinking like the kidnapping's not over. It's continuing on. This is phase 2 and someone in law enforcement's involved is what I was thinking at the time. Like, why else would they do this? Why, like, are they trying to frame us? Like, it didn't make sense to me and it made it even more frightening. And I felt we have no one to turn to. I was happy to find out the FBI was involved because I thought, okay, like these are the real professionals. And it was just the same thing, if not worse.
So consistently throughout your story, I'm hearing the expectation of you to perform how people want you to. And it's more than just not being believed. You were actually offered an immunity agreement to essentially out Aaron. He was also offered the same thing. And it's almost as though that was used as a bargaining tool to try and get one of you to crack before the other one. Like they were trying to play you off against each other because they didn't believe either of your stories.
Yeah, meanwhile, while not actually looking for the person that did it.
Absolutely.
Right.
And if it weren't for a police officer quite far away connected to a different crime that he had also committed, I think your story would be very, very different. So when did you first hear from Misty, and how was that process from your perspective?
So we didn't talk to Misty until 2018. I didn't even know exactly the details of the investigation other than Mueller attacked another family and what was reported on the news as far as him leaving the cell phone, and that's how they traced the call. In the FBI affidavit, we learned a little bit more about that home invasion and some of the things that they investigated and what then they later found as far as the goggles and the blonde hair. But now what I know is that when Misty contacted the FBI and said, you know, that case that you called a hoax, I think there's a connection here. They went in and took all the evidence and took over the case. And so she was done with it. And then they moved forward with whatever version of an investigation that they had. And I mean, it's unfortunate because I feel like if Misty stayed on the case, she would have pursued leads that were very obviously there. And again, things would have been different. And then even because of what happened and how the FBI originally treated us, they didn't question us for more information. It was just kind of like, this is what we're doing. And now we were suspects and we're going to prosecute you and you can get jail time to, oh, you're victims and we're going to need you to speak in court and you're really reliable sources, yet we don't believe this huge chunk of information about why you think that there's other people. But you are such good, victims and telling what happened that it's really important for you to be on the stand. And so it was just this really... And also we can't speak publicly. And if you speak publicly and share all these fuck ups, then it could negatively impact the criminal case and Mueller might get less time. And so now we're in a position where we have to stay silent, even though the facts of the case are being misrepresented, misreported. And we have to wait it out because our primary goal is to make sure this man does not hurt another family. And we tried to do that initially and we were ignored and he attacked another fucking family. So, the amount of pressure and expectations of victims, not just, right after and reporting the crime, but all the things that we have to do after to make sure that they get the conviction that is needed to protect the public, to protect other victims. It's incredible. But that was our main focus.
The whole premise of law is innocent until proven guilty, but you guys were guilty until proven innocent the entire time. Not only were the police not reprimanded for fault after fault after fault, actually that's too kind, fuck up after fuck up, but one of the officers ended up getting a promotion and he won an award, I saw. How does that make you feel when you watch that back now?
Oh yeah, everyone got promoted. Yeah, I mean, that's one of those laughable humor moments that is not funny, but you either you laugh or you cry because it's just insane. One of the reporters who had done really great reporting consistently after Mueller was caught, she had reached out to us to say, hey, we're going to have this report come out. It might be triggering, but Detective Mustard got awarded Officer of the Year. And I laughed. I straight up laughed out loud because I'm it's insane. It is ridiculous. It is you really need to stroke his ego that much the same year that he fucked up this kidnapping. And we named him in a civil lawsuit. So there's a civil lawsuit in the works, but he's getting Officer of the Year. I mean, it's so ridiculous.
It's like you cannot write it. You cannot write it.
Right.
With that lawsuit, you guys sued for defamation. Was there ever accountability taken? Was there ever an apology? Was there ever people who came to you and said, I'm really sorry I did this. I'm really sorry that I didn't believe you. I fucked up and I just want to apologize for my own mistakes?
So one of the agents did later on. But as far as the Vallejo police and everyone involved, from the chief of police to the captain to everyone, their counters through their lawyers is, we did nothing wrong. All your claims are unsubstantiated. We were valid in believing this and treating you that way because you didn't act like a victim, because you were calm, you were wearing sunglasses, you had bags. Like, I didn't have control over that. He took my bags and then he dropped me off with the bags. Like, that's not up to me. Like, he put sunglasses on my head. I still had them on. So it was just more and more rounds of victim blaming. It's not us, it's you, it's your fault. We did nothing wrong. And there was never been any accountability with any of them from Vallejo. And, or that lead FBI agent, Sesma. Again, he's gotten promoted and blamed circumstances and not taking accountability. I think he even might have, from what I've heard, claim that he stayed on the case because he built a good rapport with me. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Because I was polite to you? I mean, that's another thing I don't think people realize that's really bullshit, is you're in the worst moments of your life and these law enforcement people and authority come in and they say, hey, how's it going? Oh, I heard you lived on the East Coast. How was that? Oh, so you're a physical therapist, and you have to do this small talk bullshit because you're entertaining them, because you don't want to be disrespectful, because you're hoping that they will help you. And that's not rapport. It's wasting time. It's wasting my mental energy, my physical energy. Like, get stuff done.
You've also just come from performing. Like, you've just come from this whole feeling like you needed to build rapport with your attacker, and you've been put into almost the same situation where you're like, how am I best going to how am I best going to get through this?
Also, what a dumb question. Like, oh, where are you from? I was just
It actually
raped.
doesn't matter.
Like, why does that matter where I'm from?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's definitely something I hope that they can change, because it's really ridiculous. So it's like, and also too, it's like, you weren't even it wasn't real rapport. He was trying to manipulate me because he believed that I committed a hoax. So it's not actually rapport. You're just trying to, it's essentially, I mean, that was like also one of the most terrifying realizations after this, is hearing what Aaron went through with his interrogations and all of what we experienced with law enforcement. The psychological manipulation and, quite frankly, torture was the same as how I was treated in captivity. They read the same book and they did the same tactics. And when you can't distinguish between the good guys and the bad guys, I think that's a serious problem. And hopefully, again, they can self-reflect and make changes. But as far as Vallejo police themselves, or at least the ones that were involved in this case, I don't.
I think accountability has to be the first step of that, to recognize that something needs to change.
Yeah, and that's also another thing too. It's like, they probably could have saved a lawsuit if they just straight up face to face said, you know what, I'm sorry, I believe this. Like, we understood why they doubted parts of it. It was so hard to believe, even living through it, that this was happening. No one expects to be woken up in the middle of the night and attacked on the street, or, you know, like, you don't walk around expecting that. Otherwise you'd live your life in terror. And so, like, I can understand why parts of it was hard to believe, but again, they didn't follow the evidence. You can believe what you want to believe, but do your job, follow the evidence. And they didn't do that. And then it's like, okay, you messed up. Just admit, I made a mistake. how can I learn from this and not make another mistake and not put innocent victims through this again? And they just refuse to do that. That is what is much more frightening, I think, to me. We're all capable of making mistakes, but how we learn from them is key. And they didn't learn.
The message in the docuseries was definitely that the police took no accountability and fucked up, which I think is brilliant that it's out there, because I didn't realize how inept they were until I watched the docuseries. But one thing I think a lot of people are thinking, myself included, is that most people, you would assume, when they go through something so horrific and so traumatic as a couple, it would drive them apart. It would cause so much guilt on both of your behalves that maybe you could have done something differently to save it. Why did this happen? So much stress, so much trauma that you both have to work through. But for you and Aaron, it appears from the outside to be the opposite, because you look like you have an amazing life now and you're married and you have children. Was there ever a time that that was going to go another way?
I mean, the first year was really hard, but I didn't really doubt whether us being together was the right decision. It was, like the reason why we stayed together is because we belong together. Like I said in the beginning, our chemistry was undeniable. We feed off of each other while we were each other's biggest fans and cheerleader. And the one thing that we never did ever was blame one another. And our families never blamed anyone, so there was never any of that dynamic. And that was a key thing to help us through it as individuals and as a couple. Both of our families were incredibly supportive and helpful. And there was, of course, the self-doubt and the self-guilt and blame. And that was more individual, internal to ourselves. And we went through couples therapy and we discussed a lot of those types of insecurities and fears. And it was a lot of hard work, but we got through it. And we understood each other on a level that I don't think many people could, so, and a lot of this, even just going through the court cases and dealing with law enforcement and then speaking publicly, I don't think we really could do it if we didn't have each other. There's moments where I'm completely wiped out and Aaron's the one who's strong and taking over things. And then sometimes that role switches, and then sometimes we're both defeated and we just have to lay on the couch and accept that. And that's fine too. So I think kind of accepting that it's not a straight line to recovery and there's ups and downs, and we give each other and ourselves a lot of grace as much as we can. I think being in the professions that we are as physical therapists and helping others heal and find peace and overcoming obstacles helps us understand even trauma and the brain and the body and recovery. So we have that advantage as well. So I think there's a lot of pieces that helped us see through the other end.
Denise, you guys have gone on to have a beautiful family. What's the significance of the day that your daughter was born?
I think instantly I want to cry. I can't. So yeah, she was born March 25th, 2020, which is 5 years to the day that I was released from the kidnapping, which is just insane. It's really life truly coming full circle and creating new memories, new meaning, having, because I'm sure a lot of people who've gone through a traumatic event, the anniversary around that time is always re-triggering, the smells in the air, there's just so much that brings you back to that place. And now we get the opportunity to have this amazing little human who's just so sweet and full of life and innocence. And, we get to experience life all over again through her eyes and guide her through it. And that's just amazing. And now we have another little girl, and just seeing them interact. And that's certainly, it refuels you and motivates you any moment where I'm I can't do this. I can't put myself out there publicly again. Look what happened, but then I'm well, fuck, things need to change, and things aren't going to change if people don't know how bad this is. So we need to make sure we are doing whatever we can for those little girls.
Denise, your story is truly incredible, but the most incredible part about the story is not what happened. It's you and Aaron and the way you have handled it and the way you were speaking about it and trying to make change and getting up and doing podcasts like this, which we appreciate and we know can't be easy. But the fact that the story also focused on the victims instead of the perpetrator, and I know that that was a pretty active decision by the producers. Did you have much of a say in the way that this documentary came together? Did you get any oversight, any changes? What was that like?
Oh yeah, we would not have worked with them if it would have been different. It's just hard for, I think, anyone to understand how difficult it is to go through this process of trying to tell your story publicly in the quote unquote entertainment industry, because you don't have any power as a subject. And we knew we wanted to write a book before we did anything, because we knew anything on film was going to be edited. Contractually, when you enter these types of projects, all the power is in the people with the money, the networks and the producers. And it's written in the language, like, we get to use your life rights, your name, exploit, dramatize, whatever, in any way that we can. So it's a big leap of faith, and we've entered some things where we've had to get out of because it did not match. This isn't what we agreed to. It's been it's really big fights to get out of contracts. And so when we talked with Raw, the production company, we saw Tinder Swindler, we saw other works that they did. It was very victim centric. So we've seen the proof is in the pudding. They've already done this. This is what they, not just what they're claiming, but what they're showing that they're doing. They already had contracts with Netflix, so Netflix was already on board with that. And again, we had many, many talks with Netflix, with them before, like, we had them write an outline before we moved forward. And even along the way, there's still, differences in opinion of what should be highlighted or not. But I think ultimately, like, they showed the emotion around it. They highlighted the really important pieces and the overall message and theme that people were taken away with is why we wanted to do this. And so, yeah, it was a lot of work, and we're grateful that we were able to find the right team finally to do it, and that it was received well, which I think, just on another side note, is encouraging to me, because I think in 2015 things would have been very different of how true crime was structured. And people are wanting to hear more from victims. It's less about what's the perpetrator up to. There's some people who still want to focus on that, but it's more what's the bigger picture, and seeing more about the systemic flaws and wanting to make change. So I think that says a lot about who we are as a society and an audience as well. So it's overall, like, I'm just really pleased with how it all turned out.
Denise, I also think that while reliving these experiences on such a large scale would cause so much pain, I know that there would be so many people, particularly women, who would be feeling as though they could relate to you. Yours is obviously the extreme version, but far too often victims are not believed. And do you feel as though going through this process of reliving it and having more and more people hear your story, do you think it has been worth the positive outcome?
Yes. And I need continued therapy. It's been physically really painful the last month, and it's frustrating for myself. And I almost feel ashamed, because it's like, everyone's been so nice. I mean, it's insane how many people from all over the world have reached out and shared their stories with me and saying how strong and brave I am. And then I'm at home, with my stomach sick and in a ball and going, I'm not brave and strong. Like, if I feel this way,
They can run parallel to each other.
Correct. And I have to keep reminding myself that, because logically, I know that. Internally, that's where the work still lies, So we both have come a long way, and we've made progress. And I think it's just part of the realization, if we do put ourselves out there, we need that extra assistance to help get us through it. Because it's a part of our healing to be able to share and try to connect to people on a more global scale. And we need to attend to these deep wounds as well. So we'll keep working on it personally and then also on these projects. So
Denise, I can't thank you enough for giving us your story and your time today, because like you just said, that's not easy. And I can't imagine what it's like having to relive it, but you're doing it for you as much as you're doing it for past victims. And I know that you just said you get a little bit nervous about putting yourself out there again and telling your story again because the response in the past hasn't necessarily been amazing. But I want you to know that we are on your team, and I know our audience is on your team too. And that's why we're doing this today. And we just wish you nothing but an amazing, healthy, wonderful future.
well, thank you. I really appreciate it.